The rain fell in silver sheets as Eli Vance's rental car crawled along Blackthorn Harbor's crumbling coastal road. His windshield wipers groaned in protest, barely keeping pace with the storm's fury. Through the downpour, the town emerged like a half-drowned corpse. Salt-bleached houses slumped against the wind, their darkened windows watching him pass. Eli's fingers tightened on the wheel. He'd seen this place before, not in photographs or history books, but in his dreams. The same peeling paint on the general store, the same crooked steeple on the abandoned church, the same sickly green glow from the Blackthorn Inn's flickering neon sign. The inn's lobby smelled of wood polish and something worse, something damp and ancient that clung to the back of Eli's throat. Behind the desk, an old man with skin like weathered driftwood didn't look up from his newspaper. "Reservation for Vance?" Eli said, water dripping from his sleeves onto the ledger. The clerk, his name tag reading J. Peterson, blinked slowly. "You're the historian." Not a question. He slid a tarnished brass key across the counter. Taped beneath it, a note in shaky script. "Dock 7, 11:45 p.m. Tell no one." Eli's thumb found the scar on his palm, the one shaped like a ship's wheel. It hadn't ached this badly since the nightmares returned. Fog swallowed the harbor whole, reducing the world to the creaking dock beneath Eli's boots and the occasional mournful cry of a gull. Dock 7 leaned precariously over black water, its pilings crusted with barnacles that looked too much like teeth. A man emerged from the mist. Eli's breath caught. The sharp cheekbones, the pale eyes that missed nothing. This was Captain Donahue, but younger, much younger. The Donahue from Eli's nightmares had been a grizzled wreck of a man, his face carved with decades of bad decisions. This man couldn't be older than 30. "You're late," the younger Donahue snapped, though Eli's watch read 11:43. The cabin of Donahue's trawler, the Marlin, stank of diesel and spoiled meat. Charts covered every surface, marked with red X's where ships had vanished. At the center lay a water-stained file labeled Peregrine, E. Vance. Eli's hands shook as he opened it. His own face stared back from a newspaper clipping. Dr. Elias Vance, noted maritime historian, presumed dead in Lake Superior tragedy. The date? Next Thursday. Found that in the archives last month, Donahue said, lighting a cigarette. The flame revealed fresh scratches on his wrists, 3 parallel lines like claw marks. He tossed a waterlogged notebook onto the table. Eli recognized his own handwriting immediately. Pages and pages of frantic notes about the Peregrine, dated 1789. Outside, something heavy dragged itself along the hull. Donahue didn't flinch. "Your team disappeared 3 weeks ago. Now the ship's back." He exhaled smoke through his nose. Eli's headache spiked. Behind his eyes, the whispers began. "Come home, Elias." The trawler's radio crackled to life. Static, then a voice that shouldn't exist. Eli's own, but older, ragged with fear. "Don't let him near the lighthouse." The transmission cut off. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Donahue's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome back, Doctor." Somewhere beneath them, the water began to boil. The pre-dawn air clung thick with the scent of rotting fish and diesel as Eli stepped onto the Marlin's deck. His boots stuck to the damp wood as if the boat itself resisted his presence. Rachel Lowe stood near the bow, her auburn hair whipping in the wind like a distress flare. The sight of her sent an unexpected pang through Eli's chest. 3 years since their disastrous fieldwork together in Maine, and she still carried that same battered leather satchel filled with paranormal investigation gear. "You look like hell," she said, handing him a thermos of coffee that smelled suspiciously of whiskey. Eli took it, their fingers brushing. A static shock jumped between them, strong enough to make Rachel yank her hand back with a curse. Neither mentioned how her digital recorder, still running in her pocket, suddenly filled with the sound of distant screaming. Donahue emerged from the wheelhouse, his youthful face already lined with exhaustion. "We're heading to the last coordinates my father's crew radioed in before they vanished." He tossed Eli a heavy-duty flashlight. The beam flickered when Eli tested it, casting erratic shadows across the deck. "Pray we don't find them." By noon, the lake had turned glassy smooth, unnaturally so. Eli watched the sonar screen paint the lake bed in ghostly green lines. A massive shadow appeared at the edge of the scan, then vanished. "Did you see?" Rachel began. The radio crackled to life. A voice Eli recognized as Donahue's, but decades older, gasped, "It's right beneath you!" The Marlin lurched violently. Rachel's equipment case slid across the deck, spilling EMF readers and infrared cameras. One camera turned on by itself, its display showing a thermal image of the crew, and a fourth figure standing among them, its heat signature black as the depths. Eli's malfunctioning flashlight beam cut through the gathering fog, illuminating what shouldn't exist. The Peregrine. The three-masted schooner floated 50 yards off starboard, its tattered sails billowing in the non-existent wind. Even from this distance, Eli could smell it. Salt and mildew, yes, but underneath, the coppery tang of fresh blood. Donahue crossed himself. "That's impossible! She went down in 1789. Rachel's recorder, still running, captured a whisper none of them heard in the moment. "Welcome back." The radio burst to life again, this time with the crisp tones of a Coast Guard dispatcher. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Coast Guard Sault Ste. Marie responding to distress call from research vessel Marlin. Coordinates match your current position. Repeat, if you are receiving this, your vessel is sinking. We have voice confirmation of one Dr. Rachel Lowe screaming for Dr. Elias Vance. Search and rescue en route, but..." The transmission dissolved into static. Rachel's face drained of color. "I haven't screamed your name," she whispered. "Not yet." The sonar screen flashed red. Something massive was rising directly beneath them. The rowboat creaked as they approached the Peregrine. Up close, the ship looked both centuries old and freshly abandoned. Barnacles crusted the hull in strange, deliberate patterns. Eli realized with a start they formed faces, their mouths open in silent screams. Rachel went first, her boots thudding on the rotten deck. The wood gave slightly underfoot, like flesh. "Hello?" she called. Her voice didn't echo. The ship swallowed sound whole. The galley door swung open on its own. Inside, a pot of stew still bubbled over a lit oil lamp, the smell of beef and onions incongruously normal. A ship's log lay open on the table. Eli's breath caught as he read the last entry. December 3rd, 2024. Crew assembled. Captain Donahue, Dr. Vance, Mrs. Lowe. May God have mercy on our souls. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. That's today's date. A thump came from above deck, then another and another. Footsteps. Something was walking toward them, wearing Donahue's face. The thing wearing Donahue's face stood frozen in the galley doorway, its smile stretching just a hair too wide. The oil lamp's flame guttered, casting jagged shadows across features that weren't quite right. The nose slightly off-center, the eyes spaced too far apart, as if someone had assembled Donahue from memory rather than sight. Eli's fingers closed around a rusted meat cleaver on the galley counter. The metal burned cold against his palm, its edge flecked with dark stains that flaked away like old blood. "Captain?" Rachel's voice trembled. She took an involuntary step back, her boot sinking slightly into the warped floorboards. The wood gave like flesh beneath her weight, releasing a coppery scent that made her stomach churn. Not Donahue tilted its head. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the ceiling beams, from inside their own skulls. "You're late for muster." The ship groaned around them, the sound vibrating up through the soles of their boots. Somewhere below decks, something heavy thudded against wood in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Thump, 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 like a heartbeat. The stew pot still bubbled over the oil lamp, its rich aroma of beef and onions clashing violently with the ship's pervasive stench of mildew and salt-crusted rot. Eli's stomach turned as he spotted the ladle resting against the pot's rim, its bowl tarnished black with what looked like congealed blood. Rachel moved toward the ship's log, her fingers hovering over the open page. "This isn't possible," she whispered, her breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. Eli read over her shoulder. The last entry detailed their supposed boarding, in perfect 18th century script, dated that very day. Above it, the manifest listed the crew: Captain Elias Vance, First Mate Rachel Lowe, Boatswain James Donahue. Eli's breath caught. His fingers traced the faded ink of his own name, ink that flaked away at his touch, revealing fresh black letters beneath that read, Captain Elias Vance, 1789. The thumping from below grew louder, more insistent. The companionway stairs descended into perfect blackness. Eli's flashlight beam cut through the dark like a knife, illuminating motes of dust, or perhaps something else, dancing in the air. The lower deck stretched before them, lined with hammocks swaying gently despite the still air. Each one held a shape. Not bodies, not quite. "Are they sleeping?" Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking timbers. Eli moved closer. The nearest figure was little more than a depression in the fabric, as if someone had lain down and simply faded away. Only their outline remained, the canvas stained dark where the face should have been. At the far end of the deck, one hammock swung empty. Its ropes creaked with each movement. A cold hand closed around Eli's wrist. He whirled, cleaver raised, to find nothing there, just his own arm, now bearing 3 fresh scratches exactly like Donahue's. Blood welled in the grooves but didn't drip. It simply vanished back into his skin. From above came the unmistakable sound of the anchor chain rattling out. The ship was preparing to sail. Back in the galley, the stew pot now boiled violently, spattering the walls with dark liquid. The ship's log lay open to a new page, one that hadn't been there before. Rachel read aloud, her voice trembling. The new crew resists. They always do at first. But the Peregrine is patient. She has been waiting for them since before they were born. The oil lamp flared suddenly bright, illuminating a message scrawled in what looked like charcoal across the far wall. "Your cabin awaits." An arrow pointed toward the stern. Outside, the first tendrils of morning fog curled across the deck. Only it wasn't fog. It moved with purpose. It moved like fingers, and it was coming their way. The arrow led them to the captain's quarters, its door slightly ajar. A sliver of flickering lantern light spilled across the deck, illuminating footprints in the dust, their own. Eli pushed the door open. The cabin smelled of brine and old parchment. A massive oak desk dominated the space, its surface covered in nautical charts and a single leather-bound logbook. The lantern hanging above swung gently, though no wind touched it. Its light pulsed like a slow, steady heartbeat. Rachel approached the desk first. "This shouldn't be here," she murmured, running her fingers along the logbook's spine. This style of binding wasn't used until the 1820s. Eli opened the book. The pages were warm. The first entry took Eli's breath away. December 3rd, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Dr. Vance boards the Peregrine with Miss Lowe and Captain Donahue. They enter through the starboard passage, as they always do. Rachel's nails dug into Eli's arm. "That's us! That's exactly what we did!" Eli turned the page. More entries detailed their every move, their exploration of the galley, their discovery of the empty hammock, even their current moment of horror as they read the words describing them reading the words. Dr. Vance now turns to page 43, the next line read. Hands shaking, Eli obeyed. Page 43 showed a detailed sketch of the 3 of them standing around this very desk. The drawing's perspective came from somewhere above them, near the ceiling. Rachel looked up first. The lantern's glass reflected movement. A shadowy figure crouched in the rafters, watching them with eyes that shone like polished obsidian. "Wait," Rachel grabbed the book, flipping to the back pages. "These entries are older." She was right. Mixed among the 18th century script were pages in modern ballpoint pen, some in Eli's own handwriting, others in what looked like Rachel's looping cursive. One passage stood out. "Don't trust the food. It remembers what human flesh tastes like." Rachel's fingers brushed a still wet passage. The ink smeared across her fingertips. Eli, she held up her hand. The ink wasn't just on her fingers. It was coming from them, seeping from her pores like sweat. The lantern flared bright, illuminating a new message that hadn't been there moments before, scrawled in what looked like blood across the far bulkhead. "You've been here before." The misspelling made it worse somehow. A crash came from above deck. Donahue's voice screamed their names. They burst from the cabin to find the sky had turned not night, not day, but a sickly twilight that hurt the eyes. The fog fingers had multiplied, now crawling up the mast in thick, searching tendrils. Donahue stood at the rail, hauling on the rope ladder they'd used to board. "We need to go now." Eli reached the rail first. The ladder led down to their dinghy. Only the dinghy was gone. In its place floated a rotting longboat, its hull stenciled with the name Peregrine. From the cabin behind them, the logbook's pages turned on their own. A new entry wrote itself in furious strokes they could hear through the walls. "They always try to leave. They always fail." Rachel grabbed Eli's arm. Her fingers left inky prints on his sleeve. "We didn't come here to explore the ship," she whispered. "We came here to replace the crew." Somewhere below decks, 3 hammocks began to sway, waiting. The storm hit without warning. One moment, the deck lay still beneath that sickly twilight sky. The next, black waves slammed against the Peregrine's hull with enough force to knock Rachel to her knees. The rain that fell wasn't water. It was thick, viscous droplets that smelled of copper and left rusty stains on the weathered wood. Donahue's shout barely carried over the howling wind as he pointed toward the main mast. "Where's Marty?" Eli turned. Their 4th crew member, the quiet engineer who'd stayed aboard the Marlin, should have been visible through the storm. But the trawler was gone. Only the ghost ship remained, its tattered sails now fully unfurled despite having no crew to raise them. A scream tore through the storm's fury, raw and primal, cut short with a wet gurgle. It came from below decks. The companionway stairs had changed. Where before there had been 12 steps down to the crew quarters, now there were 13. The last one warped and splintered like a broken tooth. The thumping sound they'd heard earlier had become wet, rhythmic slapping. Slap, slap, slap. Rachel's flashlight beam trembled as it illuminated the far hammock, the one that had been empty. Marty hung there now, suspended not by rope, but by thick strands of black seaweed that pulsed with unnatural life. His mouth stretched in a silent scream, his skin gone translucent like parchment. Beneath the thin membrane of his flesh, dark shapes squirmed, elongated shadows swimming just below the surface. "Jesus Christ," Donahue gagged, stumbling back into a support beam. Eli stepped closer, his boots sticking to the suddenly tacky deck. The seaweed strands weren't seaweed at all, but hair, long, silken, and attached to something in the shadows beyond the hammocks. Marty's eyes snapped open. not his eyes, something else looking through them. Elias, the thing wearing Marty, said, in a voice like grinding glass, "You're late." Rachel backed into a sea chest, its lid slamming open with a hollow boom. Inside lay a trove of artifacts, a waterlogged Bible, a rusted sextant, and a leather portfolio stamped Blackthorn Historical Society. Her shaking hands pulled out a collection of 19th century daguerreotypes. The top image showed Marty's corpse. Same pose, same expression, same seaweed hair tendrils. The handwritten label beneath read, "Unidentified sailor recovered from wreckage 1847. Eli's fingers trembled as he lifted the next photo, a group portrait aboard the Peregrine. Himself in 19th century dress, standing over Marty's body, Rachel in a high-necked blouse, her hands covering her face, and Donahue, older, much older, holding a knife to his own throat. The final photo stole his breath. A modern Polaroid, crisp and unfaded. Taken from above, it showed the four of them standing exactly where they stood now. Marty already dead in the hammock. The timestamp in the corner read, "Tomorrow." Marty's body convulsed violently. The thing inside him pressed against his skin, stretching his features into impossible configurations. His jaw unhinged with a wet crack, and words poured out, not from his mouth, but from the moving shapes beneath his flesh. One must stay. One must feed the tide. It's always been this way. The seaweed hair yanked violently. Marty split open like overripe fruit, spilling not blood, but thick, black water across the deck. In that inky flood floated familiar objects. Eli's college ring, Rachel's favorite hairpin, Donahue's lucky silver dollar. Their belongings from different times. The ship groaned like a living thing as the black water surged upward, forming into a humanoid shape with Marty's face, but all wrong. The features sliding like wet clay. It reached for Donahue first. Rachel grabbed Eli's arm, her fingers leaving inky smudges on his skin. "We have to move." They stumbled back up the twisting stairs as the thing that had been Marty gave chase, its movements jerky and unnatural. The ship itself seemed to resist their escape, floorboards warping beneath their feet, doorways narrowing as they passed through. As they burst onto the main deck, the storm reached a new crescendo. The rain fell in horizontal sheets now, stinging their faces like needles. The black water from below had begun seeping up between the deck planks, forming grasping tendrils that reached for their ankles. From the ship's bow, a new sound cut through the chaos. The deep, resonant tolling of a bell that hadn't been there before. And beneath it all, the whispers continued. One must stay. The moment Eli's foot touched the companionway stairs, the world fractured. The walls of the Peregrine pulsed inward like a living thing, timbers groaning like tired lungs, then exhaled a wave of brine-soaked air that stank of rotting fish and fresh blood. Rachel clutched his arm, her fingernails digging deep enough to draw blood. "Did you feel that?" Above them, the storm's howl had changed. No longer just wind, but voices, hundreds of them whispering in perfect unison. Eli knew those voices. They'd haunted his dreams for years. Donahue shoved past them, his face ashen. "We need to get off this goddamn ship." The deck shuddered in response. The black water that had been Marty swirled across the planks, forming new words. "You can't leave until you remember." Then the screaming began, not from the ship, but from inside their own skulls. The world blinked. One moment Eli stood at the rail, the next he was back at the ship's wheel, his hands fused to the wood by strands of blackened seaweed that pulsed like veins. The storm raged around him, but the winds carried words now, his name, whispered by 1,000 voices. Elias. Elias. Captain Elias. Rachel and Donahue stood before him, their eyes completely black, their mouths moving in perfect sync with the storm. Blood dripped from Donahue's nose, forming the same 3 parallel lines that marked Eli's skin. "You remember now," they said together, their voices layered with something older. The wheel turned beneath Eli's hands without his command. The ship responded to his touch like a living thing. Then, blink. Darkness. Perfect, suffocating blackness. Then, the glow. An iPhone lay in the center of the deck, its screen casting a sickly blue light on their faces. A video played automatically. Eli watched himself die. The footage showed him standing on the Peregrine's deck, the storm raging around him. His mouth moved soundlessly before something unseen grabbed him from behind. The camera angle shifted to show his body contorting, bones snapping as he folded backward, exactly like Marty. The video ended. A new one autoplayed. Rachel drowning in black water. Then Donahue tearing out his own throat with his fingernails. Eli reached for the phone. The moment his fingers brushed it, the device recognized him, Face ID unlocking with a cheerful chime. The home screen showed his face as wallpaper, but older, hollow-eyed, with glowing scratches spreading across his cheek. Rachel's breath hitched. "Eli, you don't even own an iPhone." The final video appeared in the camera roll, dated tomorrow. It showed all 3 of them standing together on deck, smiling. The resets came faster now, each one peeling back another layer. 1. The galley stew wasn't beef. The meat had fingerprints. 2. The ship's wheel turned because invisible hands guided it. 3. The oil lamp stayed lit because it burned something that wasn't oil. During the 7th reset, Eli found himself alone in the captain's cabin. The logbook lay open to a new entry. The ship remembers. Break the cycle or become part of the crew forever. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. The voices resolved into a single phrase screamed by 1,000 dead sailors. "One must stay." The cabin door burst open. Rachel stood there, her eyes completely black, her mouth moving in perfect sync with the voices. "You understand now," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. "It has to be you, Elias. It's always been you." Behind her, Donahue raised the cleaver, his eyes the impossible void. The phone in Eli's pocket buzzed, the final notification. Memory full. The world snapped into focus with the clarity of a razor's edge. Eli found himself standing at the Peregrine's helm, his hands fused to the wheel by strands of blackened seaweed that pulsed in time with the ship's unnatural heartbeat. The storm raged around him, but the winds carried words now, his name whispered by 1,000 voices. Elias. Elias. Captain Elias. Rachel and Donahue stood before him, their eyes completely black, their mouths moving in perfect unison with the storm. Blood dripped from Donahue's nose, forming the same 3 parallel lines that marked Eli's skin. "You remember now," they said together, their voices layered with something ancient. The wheel turned beneath Eli's hands without his command. The ship responded to his touch like a living thing, the deck groaning as the Peregrine came alive around him. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. A storm in 1789, the sails tearing like parchment. A crewman screaming as the black water took him. A desperate bargain made. A cycle begun. Eli's knees buckled. No. The reflection in the ship's bell showed a stranger, a gaunt-faced man in a salt-stained captain's coat, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes sunken with decades of guilt. The face from his nightmares, his own face, from another life. "I died here," Eli whispered. The reflection aged rapidly before his eyes, skin withering to parchment, hair bleaching white, eyes sinking into skull-like hollows, a century of decay in seconds. The bell's surface rippled like water, and the corpse Eli mouthed words that came from the ship's timbers themselves. "You never left." The memories came faster now, each one a knife twisting in Eli's gut. 1. The original storm, the crew begging for salvation. 2. The thing that rose from the black water, not seaweed, not a monster, but the lake itself, offering a way out. 3. The deal. One soul stays so the rest may go. "You volunteered," not Rachel said, her head tilting at an impossible angle. Every cycle, you choose to stay. The deck split open beneath them, revealing the hold below, not the empty space they'd explored, but a cavernous maw lined with bodies. Hundreds of them, thousands, all Eli, different ages, different clothes, but the same face contorted in the same scream. The other versions of themselves reached up with bone-white hands. "Join us," they whispered. "Complete the cycle." Donahue pressed the rusted cleaver into Eli's palm. His touch burned like dry ice. "One must stay," he said, his voice finally his own, trembling with grief. "It's the only way the rest of us leave." The ship's log materialized at Eli's feet, open to a fresh page. The ink rose from the paper like smoke, forming new words in his own handwriting. I, Elias Vance, captain of the Peregrine, do hereby offer myself. The sentence remained unfinished. Waiting, always waiting. Rachel's hand closed over Eli's, the one holding the cleaver. Her eyes had returned to normal, green and terrified and human. "There's another way," she breathed. "You found it before. I've seen it." She reached into her pocket and produced the impossible iPhone, the one that shouldn't exist. The screen showed a single paused video. Eli standing at the ship's rail, not the wheel. Eli cutting the seaweed binding the ship, not himself. Eli screaming a single word into the storm. "No!" The image glitched. The phone screen cracked. The ship howled in response, its timbers shaking as if struck by divine wrath. The reflection in the bell watched them, its corpse face twisting in fury. "You always break at this part," it rasped. Eli raised the cleaver, not to his own throat, to the ropes. The initial strand snapped with a sound like a dying man's last breath. The ship screamed, a human scream torn from 100 throats at once. The deck bucked violently, throwing Donahue to his knees. Rachel clung to the mast, her fingers sinking into wood that had turned soft as flesh. "It's working!" Eli brought the cleaver down again. The second rope parted with a wet tear, spraying black fluid that burned where it touched skin. The reflection in the bell shrieked, its image distorting as cracks spread across the polished metal. "You can't!" it wailed. "You promised!" Eli raised the cleaver a third time. The storm answered. The moment the third rope snapped, the Peregrine screamed. Not the creak of wood or howl of wind, but a human scream torn from 100 throats at once. The deck heaved beneath them like a living thing, throwing Donahue against the mast. Blood gushed from his nose in a sudden torrent, those 3 glowing lines now pulsing like live wires beneath his skin. Rachel grabbed Eli's arm, her fingers burning hot enough to blister. "Hurry!" she shouted over the storm, "before it—" Her voice cut off mid-sentence. Eli turned to see her mouth still moving, forming silent words. Her green eyes darkened at the edges, black veins spreading like spilled ink across the whites. Then she smiled. It wasn't Rachel's smile. "Elias," she said, her voice layered with something ancient. "Did you really think you could win?" The storm stilled abruptly. An eerie calm settled over the ship as not Rachel stroked the rotting mainmast like a lover. "I tried to make it easy for you," she sighed. The cadence was all wrong, too measured, too old. So many cycles, so many chances to accept your place. Her head tilted too far to one side. "But you always fight." Eli's grip tightened on the cleaver. "Rachel?" Her laugh was a chorus, the voices of every lost sailor, every doomed version of himself from the hold below. With deliberate slowness, she raised her hands to her face and peeled. Skin parted like wet parchment. Beneath Rachel's face lay another, weathered by salt and time, the left eye milky white, a deep scar running from forehead to jaw. The face from the ship's log sketches. The original captain. His face. From the first cycle. "You never survived that first storm, Elias," the thing said with Rachel's mouth and the captain's lips. "You drowned with your crew. This?" It spread Rachel's arms wide. "This is your afterlife." Donahue moaned behind them, clawing at his throat. The glowing lines now covered his entire body, pulsing in time with the ship's unnatural heartbeat. "It's in me too," he choked out. "Has been since we boarded." Eli staggered back as understanding crashed over him. The time loops weren't loops at all. They were layers of the same damnation. Every soul the Peregrine claimed became part of its tapestry. Rachel had never been Rachel. The thing smiled with Rachel's mouth, the captain's face still visible beneath like some grotesque second skin. "She's in here somewhere," it mused, tapping her temple, "pounding to get out, just like you did." It stepped closer, moving with Rachel's grace, but the captain's swagger. "You can still say yes, Elias. Take your place at the wheel. Let them go." It gestured to Donahue. "This one's almost ripe." As if in response, Donahue's skin split along those glowing lines, revealing not blood, but black water teeming with wriggling shapes. Eli raised the cleaver, not toward the thing wearing Rachel, toward the ship itself. The first blow sent cracks spiderwebbing across the deck. The wood bled, thick, dark blood that hissed where it struck Eli's skin. The Rachel thing shrieked, "Stop! You'll kill us all!" Eli brought the cleaver down again. "I know." The second strike split the deck open. The hold yawned beneath them, not the cavern of Eli corpses from before, but an endless black ocean stretching in all directions. The Peregrine wasn't a ship at all. It was a life raft, floating on something far older. The Rachel thing lunged, but too late. Eli grabbed Donahue and jumped into the dark. They fell through freezing blackness. Donahue thrashed in Eli's grip, his body coming apart at the glowing seams. The water, if it was water, felt alive against Eli's skin, whispering in voices he almost recognized. Something brushed his leg, then his arm, then his face. Fingers, hundreds of them, grasping from the darkness. The last thing Eli heard before the blackness took him was the Rachel thing screaming after them, its voice fracturing into a chorus of every person the Peregrine had ever claimed. The black water swallowed them whole. Eli tumbled through freezing darkness, Donahue's disintegrating body torn from his grasp. The void wasn't empty. Skeletal fingers brushed his arms, his face, his chest, each touch sending a jolt of memory through him. A storm in 1789, a bargain made, a cycle begun. Then the light came, not from above, but below, a sickly green glow rising fast. Another surface, another time. He burst through with a gasp. Strong hands hauled Eli onto solid wood. Sunlight, real sunlight, warmed his face as he collapsed onto a deck that smelled of fresh tar and salt, not rot. "Easy there, Captain," rumbled a familiar voice. Eli looked up into the weathered face of Bosun James Donahue, the real Donahue, flesh and blood and alive. Around them, the crew of the Peregrine worked the sails, their faces ruddy with health. No black water, no scars, no Rachel. Just the endless blue of Lake Superior in 1789, the day before the storm. They gave him dry clothes, rough-spun wool and leather that fit too perfectly. The crew watched him with a mix of reverence and concern as he staggered to the ship's wheel. His hands knew the polished wood before he touched it. "Course is steady, Captain," said a young sailor. When the man turned, Eli saw Rachel's green eyes staring back at him from a stranger's face. "Fair winds to Blackthorn." The compass beside the wheel spun lazily. Its glass reflected not Eli's face, but the gaunt, aged visage from the ship's bell, Captain Elias Vance in his prime. The pieces clicked together. This wasn't escape. This was the beginning, the first beginning. Eli scanned the horizon. To starboard, the barest hint of black clouds gathered. The crew didn't see it yet. They wouldn't, not until it was too late. He knew what came next. 1. The storm would hit at midnight. 2. The black water would rise. 3. The offer would be made. 4. He would say yes. Again, and again, and again. Unless... Eli's hand went to his belt, where no cleaver hung, only the ship's logbook, its pages blank, waiting. The Rachel crewman touched his arm. "Something wrong, Captain?" Eli looked at the gathering storm, then down at his reflection in the compass glass. The old captain's eyes held centuries of grief. "No," Eli lied. "Everything's perfect." He turned the wheel hard to port, toward the storm. As the crew scrambled to adjust sails, Eli slipped below decks. In the hold, he found what he needed, a rusted hook knife used for cutting rope. The ship groaned as he made the first incision in the mainmast rigging. Not enough to be noticed, not yet, but enough to begin. The wood bled black where he cut it. From the shadows, a voice whispered, his own, but older. "You can't change the tide, Captain." Eli smiled for the first time in centuries. "Watch me."